Anish Thing explores subcultures around us that make for great interests and hobbies. These range from topics like affordable art to exploring the world of coffee, hi-fi, sneakers, watches, vintage fashion, where the list goes on and on. It's a podcast with something for everyone. So let the conversation begin. On today's episode of Aneesh Thing, I spoke with Joseph Radhik. He is one of the most well-known photographers in the country. A lot of the celebrity weddings pictures you'll see are shot by him. All-round really good guy, knows his stuff. And we just spoke about the evolution of smartphone photography because you don't realize how much power you have in your hand and in your phone and what a good hobby it can bring to you, which is photography. And we'll get to the episode right after these short messages. Welcome to the show, Joe. Good to have you.
Good to see you on the show, man. It's been a
really
fun show so far, actually.
Thank you.
I have been tuning in whenever I can. It's been a while, and somehow we always end up meeting in very nerdy circumstances. So Here we are again.
Last was with Nishant, I think,
Correct. With the What Hi-Fi show. I also call it the endless abyss of audiophilia.
Yeah.
So
a quick plug into the audiophile episode on the podcast, getting right into the evolution of mobile photography or smartphone cameras. What's your first memory of a camera phone experience that made you think, okay, you know what, this is really getting real now?
Okay, so I think up till about 2015, 2016, I was primarily using the phone as, just capturing daily things. I would always have my camera in the bag. Right. Back in 2016, I was invited for the launch of a Sony Xperia. You know how confusing the Xperia names have been over the years. So This was Xperia 2, 3, I have no idea. Anyway, so it was a Sony Xperia. They invited us to Udaipur. They gave us the phones a day prior to go and shoot and just figure out the camera. And it's the first time I used a phone like a camera on assignment, like with intent and not just a casual snapshot. I was actually looking to make good photos with it. And the realization didn't hit me then. The realization hit me past sunset when I went back to my hotel room, copied the files to my laptop and opened those files on my laptop. Okay. It's the first time I was actually opening phone photos on a large screen. And this is 6 years ago. And I was genuinely blown away 6 years ago. Okay. And from there, I have now over the last 6 years, I think easily done about 10 to 15 campaigns just with phone cameras. And every passing year has just been a revelation for me. But that was the first time. I'll vividly remember this. There was a backlit shot of a sunset of the palace and a couple of pigeons flying in the air, etc. I could not believe how good it looked on my laptop screen. And that's also when I realized that, we're doing a great injustice to phones in general because we take great photos, but we always see them on these tiny
smaller screens.
5.5 to 6 inch screens. Yeah. And I don't know how many of us even print our phone photos because we don't even think of it, right? But there is a lot of good stuff we are actually shooting, I think, subconsciously without even recognizing the quality of these images.
What kind of campaigns did you end up shooting on phones?
Oh, the first big one I did was after that Sony Blitz was one for Google, where we made a series of short films on how to maximize usage of your pixel. This was during the first lockdown, during the pandemic. And it was shot literally completely run and gun guerrilla style. But the biggest advantage there, we ended up creating a database of about 200 photos in various lighting conditions, various genres, including family portraits, fashion portraits, landscapes, night shots, astro, you name it. Okay. Now, in all of this, I think the biggest deal was that the sheer quality of the images. Okay, not just on the laptop screen, but the final edits and the way they were presented. The way they looked was just mind blowing for me. That's 200 images. Just so you know, the entire campaign, all through, we were shooting in what Google calls computational RAW. Okay, which is basically it is mashing in multiple images to give you this one RAW file, which now happens on the iPhone as well. I think they call it Pro RAW.
Pro RAW. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I think the mind blowing thing for me was I would pull that image into Lightroom. Just the previous day, I would have edited something from an assignment where, I'm working with these Sony Alpha 7, whatever is that time ka model with it's like full frame files, 50 megapixels each image, etc. Okay. And then right after, I would put the same preset on these Chotu smartphone photos, and it all looked the same. I
Yeah.
could pull the same amount of highlights, the same amount of shadows. It's mind-boggling, right? Like I think I know this won't translate to video, but I mean translate to audio. But the size of the sensor is about 1/8 or 1/6 that of the Sony professional camera that I'm shooting with, and the fact that you're pulling so much information out of it is just it's just mind blowing. So, yeah, and since then I've shot a lot with Oppo. In the last 12 months, I have shot artists such as fire breathers. So which means that there's a high dynamic range that you're shooting because you've got fire on one end of their face, and you have the same highlights on their face needs to be equally exposed. I've shot a bartender. I've shot an entire automobile, like a proper stylistic video, almost looking like an ad, all with a phone, and so much more, man. So much more. It's. I've used the phone a lot. Let me put it that way. But it's. We'll talk about this, or I can tell you right now. I think the biggest difference is that when I treat the phone like a camera every time, I immediately see the advantages, but I also immediately see the disadvantage. Okay, the weaknesses of the cameras of the phone camera really comes out when I push it to the limit. But on an everyday basis, it's a completely different device. I think you would know this, having done so many photography campaigns as well.
Yeah.
When you treat this device seriously, it starts to fall apart. But when you treat it like literally to capture daily life, it's something else.
I remember this phase when 6-7 years back, when DSLRs, even earlier, like suddenly the hobby was really picking up, right? When a lot of the DSLRs became around 50-60 grand. And so many people were just buying cameras. It's a hobby, which is great. Like, I got into photography as a career only because it was a hobby. And I just think today that hobby element is so easily accessible that somewhere it's getting lost. People are not realizing what a great hobby this can be, just because it's so that power, that photography power, so easily available that somewhere you perhaps might just take it for granted.
Correct.
My first experience when I got really blown away with a phone camera was the iPhone 4S. I was shooting an assignment in Italy on a Hasselblad H4D. It had that Hasselblad H4D had just come out to the point that the Hasselblad team met me at the airport in Italy and gave me that piece of kit. And just for fun, I'm taking pictures on the iPhone 4S. And much later, Cox and Kings had got in touch with me and said, can we do an exhibition of your pictures? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So alongside some of the Hasselblad prints, there were some iPhone prints. And I actually put out that saying these are phone prints. And then I end up shooting. I done a few assignments for GQ, and I never told them these are from the phone. Till they got published, and only way later I was like, that was camera, that was the iPhone. So yeah, it's just I think in the right environment, it can really work.
Yes, especially if you're like us and you walked into sets, right, which are lit so well, which there's so much beauty there. Most of the people tuning in would not have experienced this, but if you're walking onto a well lit set or basically any kind of, I won't even say set, any kind of frame that has been made with the intent of being photographed, right? There's very little difference between the big. I mean, it's literally today, though, in 2022, it's now down to minor, like subtle differences, which only the pros will catch on to. It's that tough now, especially when you talk of flagship cameras and their portrait modes and what have you.
So you spoke a little bit about the sensor size, right? I actually wanted to make people understand how the whole imaging pipeline would work on a DSLR or a mirrorless, and how different that can be on a smartphone because of merging and machine learning and stuff like that. And one very interesting stat I saw was that the iPhone 14 Pro Max flash is bigger than the iPhone 3's or 4's camera size. So that's how things are also changing on the phone, right? But can we make people understand a little bit about the image capture process, how that can be slightly different? And when you spoke about the sensor size, right, how that can make a difference?
Sure. I think so. In my hand right now, I actually have one of my Sony cameras. It's literally lying on my desk. I think the biggest difference is a professional camera or even just a dedicated camera. I think that's the right word to use, dedicated camera, because it can start from 35,000 rupees today to go up to 6 lakhs, or I mean, in your case, the Hasselblad for about 25 lakhs, right? The biggest difference is that the dedicated cameras today are relying on getting as much data as possible, as fast as possible, to the memory cards that they're shooting with, Okay, which means that when I say data, an image is taken, and it is, the whole idea is that the image is clean to begin with. So the camera is not adjusting anything within the image, it's adjusting it very minimally. It's not just an artistic choice by the camera manufacturer, it's actually a computational choice, because they just don't have the computing power within the camera body. Okay, why don't they have it? Now the biggest difference that I have learned over time is my professional camera today can easily shoot, and without breaking a sweat, about 6,000 to 8,000 photos in a single day, on one battery charge. That's literally how good it is. It never lets me down. It can shoot at 30 frames per second and do this day in and day out, right? But it's doing all that because it's literally just giving me the images I'm shooting. Phones, on the other hand, are literally holding my hand all through, right? Every image I take is, for lack of a better word, it's massaged by the phone.
Yeah.
It recognizes, I mean, there's so many things that it's doing. Firstly, every image that you take today on a flagship device like a Pixel or a Galaxy S2 22 or your iPhone or the Oppo, every image is not one image. There are, I mean, up to 25 odd exposures which are being merged together. That is number one. That's the smallest part of it. The biggest thing that I've seen in the last couple of years is how much of subject detection or artificial intelligence is used for each photo. So the context of each photo is different, right? So today, even while we're talking, if I was to take your photo, I mean, your image from this webcam, you're wearing a cap which says Swami, your face is visible behind a mic, and your t-shirt is there behind it, and then there's a red wall behind it. Now the phone's going to actually break down the image into these many parts. It's going to recognize that you have glasses on, so it's going to try and reduce glare or reflection within those glasses, increase contrast in your eyes, right? Single out your face and then increase brightness there. It's doing all of these things to take one photo. So I found the biggest difference is it's literally the phones are focusing on getting one great shot for you, while the dedicated cameras we're doing are literally about speed and robust reliability, time and again, right? And battery life and whatnot, because everything else then is an artistic choice. But this fun fact here is, I think you will, if anybody's tuning in right now, if you have an iPhone with you, take your phone out, shoot a backlit image of somebody around you, or take a backlit selfie. What does backlit mean? Just like pose with a light in your frame, right? You're going to notice something very funny. You're going to notice that the rest of the scene apart from you is very contrasty, which means that it's very well defined. It's got a lot of blacks. It's very deep. It's very detailed. But when it comes to you, the subject, and this has been a case for the last 2 years, I can literally tell if it's shot with an iPhone, is you are going to be very low on contrast. Why is the phone trying to do this? Because it's trying to make you stand out from the rest of the scene. But in doing so, it gives this almost like, I was seeing an iPhone video today morning, Aneesh, on Twitter, in fact, and I couldn't stop to think how much it looks like a video game. Okay, it looks like a rendered scene.
Yeah.
That's how much phones have went away. I'm sure it'll come full cycle again, but that's where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes.
Sorry for the long monologue.
No, that was great. This backlit example is so relevant because somewhere, at least to me, this kind of aggressive algorithms and stuff, maybe it's also making people bad photographers, because if someone if for 2 minutes you gave someone an actual camera, you would somewhere assume that a lot of these things are supposed to look good. And if you're shooting that scenario, your picture shouldn't be looking good, right? And somewhere that much pressure, even on, again, is that cycle, right? I think every year the phone companies want to up their feature in image quality, and by image quality, I don't mean the pixel peeping image quality, but perceived image quality for someone to post on social media. It's become that you point and you just get a good picture, and in reality, that would never be the case, right?
Yes.
At all. Like if you looked at a raw file of something, you're like, shit, that was a bad idea to take that picture.
There's something else here. In fact, now that you've brought this up, I've realized how if a particular phone is building upon a feature which can be advertised, for example, whatever, high dynamic range, whatever it is, right? Photography doesn't work like that. Photography is not the same for all conditions and atmospheres and environments, right? So while in a keynote presentation that feature might look brilliant, that same feature can make a really, really bad photo in an everyday scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. What I mean by this is like this example that I was giving, that your phones have infinite dynamic range like your eyes. If you're talking about that, for example, the moment you see a beautiful sunset and there's golden light on your face. Okay, it's falling on your face. It looks nice because you've seen mentally. You can imagine yourself with like this beautiful soft light on your face. The shadows are dark, and your skin is glowing, etc. You point your high dynamic range phone at you, and you take the same shot. Now, what the phone is trying to do is, holy crap, there's so many shadows behind you. I need to pull them all up. There's a shadow under your nose. There's a shadow under your chin, which I need to pull up, right? And the phone is just seeing bright light. So it's like, I need to reduce that bright light. So in doing all of that, the number of beautiful sunset, golden light photos I see on social media, Anish, which are just pathetic. I'm like, that's not how they look. That is not how they look. And if you point at 15-year-old digital camera at the same subject, you're going to find a far more aesthetically pleasing image. Yeah. But that's the thing, right? So what works in a keynote presentation may not necessarily work in your day-to-day life.
I'm doing a little test right now. I'm taking pictures currently from an iPhone 14 Pro Max and my iPhone 7 Plus, which was the first iPhone that got a zoom lens. And I really think the iPhone 7 zoom looks better because it's significantly less computing power and it's just doing less stuff.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it works, sometimes it's just a complete mess.
Yeah. I mean, when it does, it's glorious. But I guess it's also good to just chime into our viewers that we are possibly in a transition phase right now, where we are feeding so many images to a machine learning algorithm, right? And this is probably a 5 to 8 year or even a 10-year long phase, where after all of this information then finally sits with the computing overlords, we're going to come close to an aesthetically pleasing image. It's still a long way away. But I think that's where we are at. We are still in the baby steps of machine learning. I would say machine learning really started in 2016 with the launch of the Pixel 1. And since then, I mean, the Apple's just taken it ahead because their computing power is off the charts. Yeah. And that's where they are at. I would like to add one last thing here. If you are somebody who's never used a dedicated camera, okay, and you're using your phone on a day-to-day basis, I think the biggest difference you will notice when you pick up a professional or even an enthusiast camera is the sheer speed in which a regular camera operates. Okay, there's a certain lack of confidence that I find in nearly every smartphone, including the flagships. Okay, when it comes to focus, when it comes to exposure, they're making so many decisions today that at some point their computing power is ahead of their, like their regular stuff. Whereas a camera is just like, this is light, and this much amount of light I have, and I'm taking a photo. That's it. So when I'm traveling to nowadays, like I've gone back to this. Okay, so for 4 years now, I have been ditching my camera. Today, I've gone back to taking my camera on trips wherever I go because I can tell the difference. There is so much, and it's cool, man. Every camera has Wi-Fi enabled nowadays, so it lets me post on social media and all of that jazz. But I've gone back to taking cameras. I think I'll wait and hope that there will be a time where we'll get back to slightly less aggressive processing.
The last camera I purchased was the Nikon D3S. And
Wow.
And that was what I think a 3.5 lakh rupee camera body that time. That was the low light king. That just changed low light. What you could imagine of DSLR doing. But even on that camera, the only thing it would do, or cameras did, and you can add on this, was they would only talk about dynamic range. And how fast the focusing could be, or you could manually focus.
Correct.
And Nikon would say, we've trained the camera to recognize 256 scenarios to do your dynamic range balancing, right? That was it. There was nothing else. Then you shot RAW and you took it to the laptop and everything happened there.
That's it. So in fact, I am holding a very interesting camera in my hand right now. It's the A7R5, the just released.
The new
it's
one.
Been a month. Yeah, the new one. And this is possibly the beginning of, and I have the A1 as well here beside me, but this is possibly the beginning of when we see a little bit of the technology that's being used in phones, the good part of it, might start seeping into professional cameras. So I think the biggest difference now, I mean, in terms of the final image looking a certain way, which phones do, is subject detection, right? So they're able to look at an image, study it, and say that this image is made of so many elements. Okay, there is a tree in the foreground, there is a palace in the background, there's a person standing in front. The person is front lit, back lit, side lit, whatever it is. The person is smiling, not smiling. The cameras, the phones are able to understand all of that. But the biggest difference, I guess, is there two large parts to an image. One is the exposure, or how the phone is deciding to light a certain image. Okay, and the second is the focus, right? So what's interesting is in both of these cameras, they're both using AI for the focus side of things and not so much the exposure.
Yeah, which is great.
So they have, which is great, which is the way it should be done, because so immediately the this camera is able to, and by the way, this is not just Sony. DJI has been doing this for the last 3 years, and literally so few people talk about it. When you fly a drone into the air today from DJI, it can, I mean, and you point it at a certain subject and you just select that subject on your screen using your fingers. It can tell whether it's a car, a human being on a bicycle, right, or two people, and it can track them in focus, and it can take it one level above because it's a moving camera, right? It can move the camera around based on, it can do certain stylized moves which you would not be able to do as a single camera operator. It can even do focus in and zoom in and zoom out while like flying around at 50 kilometers per hour. It's crazy. I've been playing around with drones for a long while, but it just blew my mind. Again, good thing is the DJI is using a smartphone sensor and a smartphone processing pipeline. Okay, so it's able to do all of that.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to see that at least camera manufacturers still have their heads on their shoulders and they're not pushing really aggressive post-processing algorithms, but we're there. I mean, we're doing crazy things on the camera side of things, which are, I think, the mainstream doesn't talk about too often.
This Sony one even does aeroplane recognition and stuff, right? Like that,
Yes.
right? It's got a
Yes.
bunch of modes.
It even does. If I point it to a car and I do a pan shot, it can tell which car I'm trying to, to focus on.
Fun.
It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool. So it's again, as I said, we've been seeing this tech in drones for the last 4 or 5 years now. Since the first Mavic came out, it was very rudimentary back then, but the latest ones are pretty cool. I was in Maldives just now. I literally selected myself on the controller and I started walking away without looking at the controller. Okay, and it would just follow me. Not just follow me; it'll do a circular shot around me. It can do a Hitchcock zoom while doing all of this. It's insane. We'll get there. I think I'm just happy for the fact that there's so much innovation happening on the computational side of things. So it means that trickle down, we'll get very cool features in the days to come.
We'll take a short break, and when we come back, I want to touch upon some really cool smartphone camera features and a bunch of other things.
Okay, cool.
All right, so we'll take a short break and we'll come back to this episode of Aneesh Thing powered by Kodak Privy League program. Welcome back to the show. I'm with Joseph Radhik, and we were just talking everything about smartphone cameras and the technologies that are trickling down from drones to mainstream cameras to camera phones. The drone example that you gave, right? I think that's where all of this really enables you to be more creative rather than, making creative decisions for you. It's just enabling lesser people to pull off a shot, or, just giving you options you could have never thought of. Tell me some camera features that you might have used over the last few years that have genuinely surprised you for the good. Like for me, couple of things to give you an example. I think it was Pixel 2 night mode. Pixel 1 night low light was anyways great, but Pixel 2's low light was, I was like, damn, this is really, really good, even if you blew up the images or printed them. And currently, the second iteration of cinematic video on the iPhone 14 Pro, which does cinematic mode now in 4K, I think they've done a major improvement, and a lot of times I'm just surprised by the quality of video I'm getting.
Yeah, definitely, man. So in fact, I'll tell you, I think it was a beta feature in the very first Google Pixel, when they launched portrait mode. Today we just take it for granted. You just point a camera, you take a shot, and it's a portrait mode, right? But in that first beta, Google needed you to move your phone like in a vertical manner in
yeah.
3 different positions. Yeah, but the first time I did it, it's like seeing, I don't know, high definition images for the first time or something. You're like, oh my God, it can do, like, computational photography was that portrait blur, just seeing it like that, just, it was incredible. It is like the beginning of a new era almost. We've come a long way since then, with especially in terms of edge detection. Just see what the Find X5 that I was using, the Oppo Find X5 that I was using, like, it literally, when I take a portrait mode photo in selfie mode with it, I can see that it's blurred out spaces between my hair, right? So it's kept my hair in focus and it's blurred out. It's crazy how good it has gotten over in a short span. It's only been 5.5 years. Actually, October 2016 was the Pixel 1 launch, but the portrait mode really came in only in 2017 or so. So it's been less than 6 years that we've seen all of this happen. Definitely the first time I saw cinematic mode on an iPhone, I think the biggest thing for me was not the fact that the background was blurred, but how it was able to rack focus from a foreground to back. I was like, I was like, no way this is happening. It's so smooth. Again, with confidence rather than, a glitchy feature type situation. In the last couple of years, I've seen some very interesting other features. I think a couple of them have been present in mainstream like the iPhone, but on the Oppo phone that I used, they had a light trail mode. Literally a light trail mode, which means that, you could make these images which have like either cars on the road at night, which will give this really surreal light trail effect, but all using handheld phones, or also even using light painting, which is the other cool thing. If you had a friend or somebody else move a light around you, they could do that again in handheld, because it's able to detect the subject, freeze the subject, and then do everything else. I've used this 19,000 rupee. Yeah, that's the correct. This is an 18,999. 19,000 rupee smartphone. It's called the F21 Pro, which has a macro mode in it. Okay, so this is not a macro mode like we are used to. This is a proper 1:2 macro mode, which means that the lens can touch your subject and it'll still take a sharp image, which means that I could shoot, like, I have these small guppies in a fish tank outside. I could literally shoot their faces. Okay, that's how close you could get. It's bizarre. Like, you can get into the threads of a currency note, right? Once you get in really ridiculously close. So stuff like that too. I think couple of years ago I used a phone with 4 lenses: an ultra wide, a regular, a 2x zoom, and a periscope 10x zoom. And the 10x zoom just works. I was on a trip with it. I was on a vacation travel trip with it, in fact. And the 10x zoom would just work like a regular 200 zoom or something like that on a big phone, on a big camera. So many things, yeah. But the biggest things are these. The biggest things are the stuff that I think allow you to make photos that are really cool. But you as a photographer, us as photographers, would recognize that, boss, that takes a lot of effort with a regular camera.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of effort. Like a light trail would mean that you're lugging a tripod. So many things. Okay, or light painting would mean a tripod, 2 ways to light, a tube. So many different samagri that you would take today, which you don't just need, just one freaking phone in your hand.
And
Pretty crazy.
Half my life has gone into lugging a tripod, and that would be my biggest advice to everyone back in the day. I was like, dude, you have to have a tripod. There is no ways you're traveling without a tripod.
Yeah.
Those were the days. Even just this power, right? Like, if you look at the computational power, I think Apple's website for the 14 Pro, they've introduced that sports mode, or whatever they're calling it, which acts like a gimbal and like does super
Action
stabilization, action mode. And the copy they've put on that is like shaky video, fix it in pre. And that's the computation that phone has, which is crazy. So you can do so much with it. What is your workflow like on if you're taking pictures on your phone and posting them? What's your typical workflow like?
Okay, so 2 completely different things. 2 completely different workflows that I have. One is of my day-to-day phone usage, which is the first one I'll talk about. I don't have that much of a workflow there. When I say day to day, it's photos of my dog, it's photos of my wife, it's photos of our life, etc. It's not so much something that I'm treating as something that I need to sit down and edit on a PC. Okay, so these are my number one edit software is still Snapseed. It's only because
Same.
of it's honestly it's because of laziness more than anything else. I'm just used to opening Snapseed. It's muscle memory at this point, because Adobe Lightroom today is a much better software, especially because it has noise reduction and the ability for me to port over presets from my desktop to phone, etc. But Snapseed is what I use 90% of the time. My Snapseed folder on my phone is synced to Google Photos. So which means that that's the first thing, that's the first part of the workflow, by the way. For 8 years now, all my photos have been on Google Photos. It just helps. I mean, I'm sure if you're on iPhotos, it's the same thing. You will have memories and you will have the ability to just turn back the clock and figure out whatever you want and find photos and find people more easily. Yeah. So Google Photos is number one. Snapseed is number two, right? I also have, I have a grid app. I have a collage making app on my phone. It's a paid app, which I bought because it's really nice for putting together Instagram stories or multiple tweets, multiple images in a single tweet, etc. So that's my daily life bit. So, but if I'm on any kind of a trip, like I was in Masai Mara for about 4 days last month, what I tend to do is, while I'll also copy all the photos from my camera to my laptop, right, for edit, I'll also connect my phone and take images of it. Okay, that is my other serious workflow. That is my, and usually what I tend to do at the beginning of such a trip is I tend to turn my smartphone camera's RAW mode on. So I have a second file option as well. So I literally treat it like a dedicated camera, and it's quite fun. It's only, it's quite sad that the bigger moments in my life is what I tend to see in big detail, when it's actually the smaller moments that mean more, because many years down the line, Google just throws a 2015 memory at me, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wish that I possibly use the same workflow, but it's a way of it. What I do tend to do is, I think in the last, especially since the pandemic began, since we've started doing all these online sessions, right, I've started to do a series of getting better with smartphone photography workshop type scene. Whenever I have the mood for it, or if there's somebody who asks for it, the first topic I pick up is smartphone photography. And because of me teaching that workshop, I have a library of really nice, personal, happy photos with my phone, right? Because every time I'm trying to illustrate a point, I'm looking for a photo and I end up stumbling upon another great photo that I've taken, which I didn't even know existed, right? So that's a good thing. I think if you're listening in, and I think the only thing I'll ask you to do is, when we grew up, especially if you were a 90s kid, we would have these albums at home, right?
Oh, yeah.
And those albums would have like 35 photos to 32 photos, because that's how much a film roll was. I think it's a really nice effort if you're able to put together your life ka stories in these albums, because we don't know whether you'll lose your password to your cloud account at some point in time, or the cloud account itself shuts down. Google kills like 5 services a year, so God only knows what's going to happen to Google Photos, right? Yeah, and as much as you rely on the cloud, try and create some kind of physical memory, because more than just the physical part of it, it's also organizing and curating your memories, which I think is a big deal. It's nice to look back at it, so try and do that.
For me, Snapseed works great, and I've never looked at any other software because I'm so used to it. I'm sure there are tons of other features, like you said, right? Presets and stuff. Only pet peeve with Snapseed is, I wish you could save the settings you do. You can't move it from device to device, which is a pain in the ass. Like, I'll make my edits and create those look presets, and those you can't transfer. So every time you switch a device.
Can I teach you how right now?
Yeah, please.
So Snapseed, it's not a hidden feature, but it is in a very poorly hidden menu. Okay. Basically, when you open Snapseed, don't open an image with it, but open an image with Snapseed. At the bottom, you see these things called looks. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've made one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So if you go there, all the way to the end, there is a horizontal hamburger menu. If you do that, it'll have a scan QR code or make QR code for your look.
Dude, thank you for telling me this.
So it is there. It is because I've done it in the past. Like I've had clients of mine when I shoot a wedding where bride or groom, they're like, "How do your edits look so neat?" So then I'm like, "Hey, listen, just scan this QR code. It's on Snapseed."
Because
So
I literally made a preset for one of my friends' wedding who got married a couple of weeks back. So I was trying to be consistent with the pictures I was posting, and that works so well. I didn't know about this feature. Thank you. Snapseed is super easy to edit. In fact, that
Yes.
one feature is that portrait thing. And that can just brighten up someone's face, change a little bit of smile if you want, where the
add a
eyes are
catch light.
looking.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So cool.
iPhones, my other one app that I use quite a bit is Halide for raw pictures. Works really, really well, and really good team that's behind it. I was playing around with the 14 Pro raw files, 42 megapixel raw files. And even though it's that Pro RAW where there is some amount of processing happening and it's not as raw as things could get, the quality is so much better than the JPEG it puts out with all the processing. It's crazy amount of detail to just imagine a phone having that. Google Photos, I think, is super underrated. Even if you're
Yes.
not a Android user, Google Photos is just far superior than iPhotos. Purely from, for me, the searching aspect.
Yes.
It is so easy to find pictures. You say Italian wine bottle, and it'll pull up that from your library because it even does text recognition and stuff. Whatever device you're on, definitely use Google Photos for backups. Easy.
There's another small hidden feature in Google Photos, which is supposed to be a pixel specific feature at one point in time, but it's just hidden in Google Photos for everyone. The ability to open any video and stabilize it. Literally stabilize it, like hyper stabilization, like to the level that it seems like a completely seamless gimbal level shot video. If you're using Google Photos, it's right there. Open any video and you will see a small tilted rectangle within a opaque rectangle icon. Click on it and your video will be stabilized.
Since you were talking about tips, as before we end the episode,
Okay.
what would be your one tip for someone to just take better pictures, everyday better pictures?
It's going to sound contradictory to what I usually say everywhere, but shoot a lot, because I think, Anish, you and I are sitting here and we're able to have this conversation because we bring to the table about 2 decades each of just making photos. And there are things that you and I take for granted which we don't even articulate. Okay, and it's only because of the sheer amount of time we have spent making photos. So this isn't just to be a better photographer, this is to be a better observer of life in general, which I am not talking like you become that guy in American Beauty, the guy who's always
I know
standing
the guy you're talking about.
yeah, not that creepy guy, but don't become that guy. But overall, though, when I say shoot a lot, I mean, don't just keep your camera for special occasions. You see good light, shoot it. You see something quirky, shoot it. It's fine. Sometime don't even think about Google Photos and everything else that we've been talking about. The fact is that sometime later in life, when you see a very special moment, you're going to bring in all of this visual conditioning that you have over the years to make a photo of that special moment. Okay, so just getting comfortable using the device in your hand, whether it's a camera, whether it's a phone, the only way you get there is by shooting a lot. So please do that.
Yeah, and like what you said, that really translates to other things in life. I think the moment you start to pay attention to aesthetics and stuff, everything, right? Design, photography, there's so much interconnect there. One of my advices would be to just put on that grid option on your app to take pictures, just to help with composition.
Yeah.
Very underrated thing, but just focus a little bit on composition. Also, follow more photographers on Instagram. I also think Instagram somewhere just throws up so many pictures, videos every day to you, right? That I think it's also important to just follow good journalists, photojournalists, follow good publications, follow a lot more photographers.
Yeah, just artists. So don't just go by sheer number of following that they have. Right. Like yesterday, I so what I tend to do is other social media will showcase art better than Instagram. Twitter, for example, Reddit, for example. Okay. So, but whenever I find somebody there, I know that the most amount of time I spend on social media is on Instagram. So then I'll find that artist and I'll follow them on Instagram, which ensures that my feed is still better than just what Instagram is pushing at me. That artist may have 800 followers on Instagram. I don't care. Right? As long as I'm getting to see stuff that I love seeing, which is what actually most of my Reddit experience is, as opposed to the Instagram. But Reddit gives you a lot more control. It's not algorithmized as much as Instagram. Yeah.
Can you let us know your social media handles?
I am at Joseph Radhik. It's like Radhika without an E. JOSEPH RADHIK. I'm Joseph Radhik everywhere, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. If you want to talk to me, Twitter's a good place because I only have a few followers there. So I still like to engage there. Instagram is a bit noisy.
You have the blue tick. Are you going to pay for it now? What's the situation?
Absolutely not.
I'm not paying for that, man. Like,
no way.
$100 a year.
I find it hilarious.
Yeah.
No, but I'm telling you, Anish, in possibly 2 days, Elon Musk will take a call that you don't need to pay. Blue tick for everyone. I see that happening. So you have no idea what is going to happen in the next couple of days with them. So
Cool. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, man. This is a really fun chat. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. One takeaway I would actually want you to consider is to go through some of your recent pictures, maybe some of your older pictures, and print one of them. Make a print. It's really underrated and such a good experience. We are also on YouTube, so you can check this and other episodes out on YouTube as well. Aneesh Thing on YouTube. See you next week. If you like this episode, do write to me on social media. My handle is AneeshB on Twitter and Instagram. Tune in next Tuesday for yet another fun episode of Aneesh Thing on the IVM Podcast app and all major podcast platforms.